My power of attorney sold my house while I traveled. I came home to strangers. The key wouldn't turn in my front door lock. I stood there on the porch of 847 Maple Street, my home for 42 years, juggling my suitcase and David's urn, jet-lagged and confused. Maybe the lock was just sticky after 3 months away. I'd scattered my husband's ashes across the Scottish Highlands where we'd honeymooned, visited the lavender fields of Provence he'd always dreamed of seeing, and walked every bridge in Venice he'd marked in his travel books. The trip had been healing, necessary, but God, I was ready to be home. I tried the key again. Nothing. The porch light flickered on, and I stepped back instinctively. Through the window, my window, with the crack in the bottom left corner from when Tommy hit a baseball through it in 1987, I saw a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, maybe 30, wearing a pink bathrobe and holding a baby. "Can I help you?" she called through the door, her voice cautious but kind. My throat went dry. I think there's been a mistake. This is my house. She opened the door halfway, keeping the chain latched. Behind her, I could see my hardwood floors, but they'd been refinished. The walls were painted a soft yellow instead of the blue David and I had chosen. A child's toys were scattered across what used to be our living room. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we bought this house 3 months ago. We have all the paperwork." The world tilted. I gripped the porch railing, David's urn clutched against my chest. "That's impossible. I'm Margaret Chin. I've lived here since 1982. My son Tommy has my power of attorney, but he would never." The woman's expression shifted from wariness to concern. "Hold on, let me get my husband." A tall man appeared, also in pajamas. "What's going on, Sarah? This lady says she owns our house." I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. "There's been a terrible mistake. I need to call my son." But even as I said it, pieces were clicking together with horrifying clarity. The power of attorney I'd given Tommy before leaving for Europe. The emergency access to my accounts just in case something happened during my travels. His insistence that I stayed a full 3 months, even when I'd wanted to come home early after scattering the ashes. The calls that had stopped coming after the first month. "Ma'am," the man said gently, "maybe you should call the police. Or a family member. We can show you our deed if that would help." I dialed Tommy's number. It went straight to voicemail. A disconnected voicemail. "The person you are calling is no longer available at this number." My legs gave out. I sank onto the porch steps, the same steps where I'd taken Tommy's first day of school photos, where David had proposed 45 years ago, where I'd sat crying the night we got his cancer diagnosis. The young couple exchanged worried glances above me. "I'm going to call 911, Sarah whispered to her husband. Through my shock, I heard her speaking to a dispatcher. "We need someone at 847 Maple Street. There's an elderly woman here who seems confused about, yes, she believes she owns our house." Confused. Elderly. The word stung almost as much as the realization settling in my chest like a stone. My son, my only child, the boy I'd worked double shifts to put through college, whose gambling debts I'd quietly paid off twice before, had sold my home out from under me while I was honoring his father's final wishes. And I was homeless. The police officer who responded was kind but skeptical. Officer Rodriguez looked like he'd handled situations like this before, confused elderly people showing up at houses they used to own decades ago, families dealing with dementia, messy estate disputes. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation proving you own this property?" he asked, pen poised over his notepad. I rifled through my purse with trembling fingers. Passport, travel receipts, house keys that no longer worked. "It's all at home." Was all at home. The deed, mortgage papers, it's been paid off since 2019. I pulled out my driver's license. "Look, this address. 847 Maple Street." He examined it under his flashlight. "This license expired 4 months ago." Heat flooded my cheeks. I'd forgotten to renew it before the trip. Another small failure in what was becoming a catastrophic homecoming. Sarah had wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and brought me a cup of tea. Her husband, Mark, sat on the porch railing looking uncomfortable. Their baby had fallen back asleep against Sarah's shoulder. "Officer, we bought this house fair and square," Mark said. "We have all the documentation. Went through Berkshire Real Estate, clean title search, everything legal." "Who was the seller?" I asked, though I already knew. Mark hesitated. "Thomas Chin. Said he inherited it from his mother who'd passed away." The words hit me like a physical blow. Tommy had told them I was dead. Not just sold the house, he'd killed me off entirely to make the sale clean. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Officer Rodriguez leaned forward. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. My son hadn't just betrayed me, he'd erased me. "We felt so bad for him," Sarah added quietly. "He seemed really grief-stricken, you know? Said he needed to sell quickly because he couldn't bear to keep it." We paid $340,000, which was actually above asking price because we loved the house so much. $340,000. The house David and I bought for $89,000 in 1982. We'd renovated the kitchen in 98, added the sunroom in 2005, replaced the roof in 2018. Every improvement made with love, with plans for grandchildren who never came because Tommy's marriage had fallen apart 2 years ago. Tommy's gambling debts had been worse than I thought. "I need to see those papers," I told Mark. "Please." He disappeared inside and returned with a folder. The deed transfer was dated March 15th, exactly 2 weeks after I'd left for Europe. Tommy had waited just long enough for me to be unreachable, probably counting on me extending the trip like I'd mentioned I might. The seller's signature looked like Tommy's handwriting, but the name made my stomach lurch, Thomas Chin, as heir to the estate of Margaret L. Chin, deceased. There it was in black and white. My death certificate. "This is fraud," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm very much alive, and I never gave my son permission to sell this house." Officer Rodriguez was now taking detailed notes. "Do you have contact information for any other family members? Someone who can verify your identity?" "My sister Linda in Phoenix. My neighbor Mrs. Kowalski next door, she's lived there 30 years. I paused, looking at the house next door. "Actually, where is Mrs. Kowalski?" "Her lights are usually on." Sarah and Mark exchanged glances. That house has been empty since we moved in, Sarah said. The realtor mentioned the previous owner had moved to a nursing home. Another anchor gone. Another witness to my life here disappeared. Ma'am, Officer Rodriguez said gently, I'm going to need you to come to the station so we can sort this out properly. And you'll need somewhere to stay tonight. I clutched David's urn tighter. I was 67 years old, sitting on my own front porch, homeless and apparently dead according to legal documents. But I wasn't confused, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant. At 2:17 a.m., I sat in a plastic chair that squeaked every time I shifted, still clutching David's urn, while Officer Rodriguez made phone calls and typed reports that would supposedly help sort out my non-existence. Mrs. Chen, I've contacted your sister in Phoenix. She confirmed your identity and said she'd been worried when you stopped answering emails last week. He looked up from his computer. She's also confirming that you were very much alive when she spoke to you from Rome 6 weeks ago. Small mercies. At least I had one witness to my continued breathing. What about my bank accounts? I asked. I used my debit card in Munich last Tuesday. There should be transaction records. Rodriguez nodded and made another note. We'll check all that. But Mrs. Chen, I have to tell you, even if we can prove fraud, which it sounds like we can, getting your house back won't be simple. The current owners bought it in good faith. They have legal title. The words settled like lead in my stomach. Sarah and Mark had done nothing wrong except trust a grieving son's lies about his dead mother. They'd painted the nursery that soft yellow, installed new cabinet hardware in what used to be my kitchen, hung family photos on walls where mine had been. There's something else, Rodriguez continued, consulting his notes. I called Berkshire Real Estate. The agent who handled the sale, Janet Morrison, remembers the transaction clearly. She said Thomas Chen provided a death certificate, will, and probate documents showing he was the sole heir. A death certificate? My voice cracked. How does someone just create a death certificate? Unfortunately, it's not as hard as it should be. Especially if someone has access to personal information. Social security number, medical records, details about your life. He paused. Did your son have access to that kind of information? I thought about the filing cabinet in my bedroom closet. Tommy had helped me organize all my paperwork last Christmas when I'd mentioned wanting to get my affairs in order after David's diagnosis. Birth certificate, social security card, medical records, insurance policies. I thought it was sweet how concerned he was about making sure everything was accessible in case of emergency. Yes, I whispered. He knew everything. Rodriguez's radio crackled. He stepped away to answer it, leaving me alone with the fluorescent lights humming overhead and the reality sinking deeper. This wasn't some panicked mistake. Tommy had planned this meticulously. The power of attorney, the document organization, even encouraging me to take the full 3 months in Europe, telling me I deserved to really disconnect and heal after losing David. He'd needed me gone long enough to establish a timeline. Long enough for the fictional Margaret Chen to die, be buried, and have her estate settled by her devoted son. When Rodriguez returned, his expression was grimmer. Mrs. Chen, I just heard back from our fraud division. They ran a preliminary check on Thomas Chen. He's got significant debt beyond what you might know about. Gambling, yes, but also business loans, credit cards, even money borrowed against his own house. How much? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. North of $400,000. Looks like the house sale wasn't enough to cover everything. I stared at the scuffed linoleum floor, calculating. Tommy had sold my house for $340,000 and still owed money. The boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, who cried for an hour when he accidentally stepped on a beetle, had stolen my entire life and it still wasn't enough to fix his own. Where is he now? I asked. Rodriguez hesitated. That's what we're trying to figure out. The phone number's disconnected, his apartment's been vacated, and his employer says he stopped showing up to work 5 weeks ago. Tommy was gone. Vanished with my life savings, my home, and apparently whatever remained of his conscience. I was stranded in a police station at 2:30 a.m., officially dead according to the state of Massachusetts, with nowhere to go and a son who'd gambled away both our futures. But at least now I knew exactly what I was up against. The social worker arrived at 3:47 a.m. Her name was Patricia Vance, and she had the exhausted look of someone who'd seen too many family disasters unfold in fluorescent-lit government buildings. Mrs. Chen, I understand you're in a difficult situation, she said, settling into the chair across from me with a thick folder. Officer Rodriguez filled me in on the basics. I'm here to discuss immediate housing options. Housing options. As if I were some charity case instead of a woman whose own child had orchestrated an elaborate con to steal everything I owned. What kind of options? I asked, though the look in her eyes already told me I wouldn't like the answer. Well, there's the emergency shelter on Harrison Street. It's clean, safe, serves 3 meals a day. Or we have a transitional housing program, but there's usually a waiting list. A homeless shelter. The words tasted bitter. You want me to go to a homeless shelter? Patricia's smile was professionally sympathetic. It's temporary, just until we can sort out the legal issues with your property. These fraud cases can take months to resolve, sometimes longer. Months. I thought of Sarah and Mark's baby, probably sleeping peacefully in what used to be the guest room where Tommy spent countless nights when his own life fell apart. I'd held him through nightmares in that room when he was 7 and afraid of thunderstorms. At 15 when his girlfriend broke up with him. At 32 when his marriage crumbled and he couldn't make rent. Always catching him when he fell. Never imagining he'd push me off the cliff to save himself. Mrs. Chen? Patricia was watching me with concern. Are you all right? I'm thinking. I shifted David's urn to my other arm. What about hotels? I have credit cards. Officer Rodriguez looked up from his paperwork. Ma'am, we should probably check on your accounts. If your son had access to your banking information. The implication hit me like ice water. I fumbled for my phone, pulling up my bank app with fingers that suddenly felt clumsy. The login screen loaded, I entered my password, and waited. Account suspended, please contact customer service. No. I tried my savings account. Same message. My credit cards. All frozen. Patricia leaned forward. What is it? He locked me out of everything. My voice sounded strange, disconnected. 47 years of teaching, every penny I saved, my pension deposits, he's taken it all. Rodriguez was already on his radio, calling someone about financial fraud. But I barely heard him over the roaring in my ears. Tommy hadn't just stolen my house. He'd erased my entire financial existence. How is that even possible? I asked Patricia. Those were my accounts. My name. My social security number. Power of attorney can be very broad, she said carefully. Especially if it included financial decisions. He may have convinced the banks that you were incapacitated, or... She trailed off. Or dead, I finished. Like he told the real estate agent. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, stop looking for me. You'll only make this worse for both of us. T asterisk. My hands shook as I showed the message to Rodriguez. He immediately started making calls about tracing the number, but I knew it was pointless. Tommy had planned this too carefully to make rookie mistakes now. Another text arrived. Asterisk, the money's already gone. Debts were bigger than you knew. Starting over somewhere new. You should too, asterisk. The casual cruelty of it stunned me. 42 years in that house, 30 years raising him alone after his father left, decades of sacrificing my own dreams to make sure he had opportunities one never did. And his advice was that I should start over at 67 with nothing but the clothes in my suitcase and his father's ashes. Patricia was saying something about emergency assistance programs, but all I could think about was Tommy at age 8, crying because he'd accidentally broken David's favorite coffee mug. I'm sorry, Mom, he'd sobbed. I'll fix it somehow, I promise. He'd spent his allowance on superglue and worked for an hour trying to piece it back together. That boy was gone. Had been gone for years, probably, while I kept seeing him in this stranger who wore his face and knew exactly which lies would work on his trusting mother. But I wasn't dead yet, despite what his paperwork claimed. And I was going to prove it. The Harrison Street emergency shelter smelled like industrial soap and defeat. At 6:30 a.m., I sat on a narrow cot clutching David's urn while around me, people who'd lost everything in different ways began their morning routines. A woman my age folded her belongings into a grocery bag. A young mother whispered to her toddler that they'd find their own place soon. I'd become one of them overnight. Patricia had driven me here after the police finished their initial report. Just temporary, she'd repeated, but her eyes said she'd seen plenty of temporary situations stretch into months or years. The intake worker, a tired-looking man named Marcus, had handed me a set of sheets and explained the rules. Lights out at 10 p.m., up by 6 a.m., no personal belongings left unattended. Ma'am, you'll need to store that, he'd said, gesturing to David's urn. We can't have valuables lying around. This is my husband's ashes, I'd replied. He's not getting stored in a locker. Marcus had sighed and made an exception, probably because I looked pathetic enough already. Now, watching the sunrise through windows covered in safety mesh, I tried to make sense of the night's revelations. My phone buzzed, Linda calling from Phoenix. Maggie? Oh, thank God. The police called me, said there was some mix-up with your house. I've been trying to reach you for days. It's not a mix-up, I said quietly, not wanting to wake the woman in the next cot. Tommy sold the house while I was in Europe. Told everyone I was dead. Silence. Then, what do you mean, sold the house? I explained everything, the power of attorney, the fake death certificate, the young family now living in my kitchen. Linda listened without interrupting, which meant she was either stunned speechless or calculating. That little bastard, she finally whispered. Maggie, I'm booking a flight today. Don't do anything until I get there. I'm in a homeless shelter, Lynn. What exactly am I going to do? You're going to fight this. We're going to get you a lawyer, a real one, and we're going to destroy him. The venom in her voice surprised me. Linda had always been the gentle sister, the peacemaker who urged forgiveness and family unity. But then, Tommy had never stolen her entire life. The police said it could take months to sort out, I told her. The new owners bought it legally. They have children, Linda. A baby. Not your problem. Tommy made it their problem when he decided to commit fraud. After we hung up, I walked to the shelter's common area where residents could use computers for 30-minute sessions. I had research to do. The first thing I found made my blood freeze, an obituary in the Springfield Union News, dated March 8, asterisk Margaret Louise Chin, 67, beloved mother and retired teacher, passed away peacefully after a brief illness. She was preceded in death by her husband David and is survived by her devoted son Thomas. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Riverside Elementary School library, where Mrs. Chin taught for 37 years asterisk. He'd even gotten the school name right. And a request for library donations, something I'd mentioned wanting people to do when I actually died someday. But the date was what made my hands shake. March 8 was 3 days after I'd left for Europe. Tommy had killed me off before I'd even reached London. I kept digging. Thomas Chen had indeed inherited 847 Maple Street according to probate records filed in Worcester County. The will looked official, notarized, complete with my supposed signature leaving everything to my loving son. My signature. I pulled out a notebook from my purse and wrote my name several times, comparing it to the document on screen. Close, but not perfect. Tommy had practiced, but he wasn't a professional forger. That might be the crack I needed. A shadow fell across the computer screen. Ma'am, your time's almost up, Marcus said. Other folks waiting. I logged out and gathered my things, but not before printing the obituary and the forged will. Evidence. Proof of just how thoroughly my son had planned my destruction. At 67 years old, sitting in a homeless shelter, I was supposed to feel defeated. Instead, I felt dangerous. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old money, which made the conversation about my complete financial ruin feel even more surreal. Linda had flown in that morning and immediately started making calls. By 2 p.m., we were sitting across from Robert Castellanos, a fraud attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. Mrs. Chan, I'll be direct with you, Castellanos said, reviewing the documents I'd printed at the shelter. This is one of the most sophisticated cases of identity theft and fraud I've seen. Your son didn't just steal from you, he legally erased you. He spread the papers across his mahogany desk like he was laying out evidence for a jury. The forged death certificate, the fake will, bank records showing the systematic draining of my account starting March 10th, 2 days after my fictional death. The good news is that fraud this elaborate leaves a trail, he continued. The bad news is that unwinding it will be complicated and expensive. Linda leaned forward. How expensive? My retainer alone is $15,000. The full case could run $40,000 to $60,000, depending on how long it takes and whether we need expert witnesses for the document analysis. I laughed, a sound that came out harsher than I intended. I'm homeless and have $17 in my wallet. My son made sure I can't access anything else. Castellanos nodded sympathetically. We can work on contingency for part of it. If we recover your assets, I take a percentage. But Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand something. Even if we prove fraud, which I believe we can, getting your house back from the current owners won't be automatic. They're innocent purchasers. What does that mean? Linda asked. It means they bought the house in good faith, believing Thomas Chen was the legitimate owner. Massachusetts law protects innocent purchasers. We'd have to prove they knew or should have known about the fraud. I thought about Sarah and Mark, how concerned they'd been when they found me on their porch. How Sarah had wrapped a blanket around me and made tea. They hadn't known. They were victims too, in a different way. So what are my options? I asked. We sue your son for everything, criminal fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. We recover what money we can, which might be enough to buy back your house from the current owners if they're willing to sell. Or we force a court-ordered sale and split the proceeds, though that seems unlikely to satisfy anyone. My phone buzzed with another text from Tommy's unknown number, *, talk to Linda. Tell her to stay out of this. Some things can't be undone, *. I showed Castellanos the message. He photographed it immediately. He's getting nervous. That's good. Nervous people make mistakes. Can we trace this? We'll try, but he's probably using burner phones. The more important question is whether he's still in Massachusetts. If he's fled to a non-extradition country, recovery becomes much harder. Linda's jaw was tight with anger. What kind of person does this to their own mother? Someone with serious impulse control issues and a gambling addiction, Castellanos said matter-of-factly. I see it more often than you'd think. Adult children who view their parents as retirement funds rather than people. I thought about all the times I bailed Tommy out. The $15,000 when his marriage fell apart. The $8,000 for his failed catering business. The smaller amounts, rent, car repairs, credit card payments, that had seemed like normal help a mother provides. I'd been enabling this for years without realizing it. There's something else, Castellanos said, consulting his notes. I did some preliminary digging into your son's finances. The gambling debts were worse than you thought. He owed money to some very serious people. What kind of people? The kind who don't accept payment plans. Mrs. Chen, it's possible your son wasn't just greedy, he might have been desperate enough to believe this was his only option. The thought should have made me feel sympathy for Tommy. Instead, it made me angrier. He'd thrown me away to save himself from consequences he'd created. Mr. Castellanos, I said, I want you to do something for me. What's that? I want you to destroy him. The expression on Castellanos' face shifted from professional sympathy to something sharper, more predatory. Mrs. Chen, I need you to be very careful about what you're asking me to do here. I'm asking you to use every legal tool available to recover what was stolen from me, I said, meeting his eyes. And to make sure my son faces the full consequences of his actions. Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. Maggie. No. I pulled away gently but firmly. For 42 years, I've been cleaning up Tommy's messes. Making excuses. Bailing him out. Believing he'd change if I just left him enough. I gestured around the expensive office. Look where that got me. Castellanos made a note. There are several angles we can pursue. Criminal charges for identity theft, elder abuse, wire fraud, forgery. Civil suits to recover damages. We can freeze any assets he might have hidden, garnish wages if he's working somewhere under his real name. What about the people he owes money to? I asked. The dangerous ones you mentioned. He paused, pen hovering over his notepad. What about them? If Tommy's been hiding from them for months, living off my money, what happens when that money runs out? Mrs. Chen, I can't advise you to. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, I interrupted. I'm asking if there's a way to let those people know that Thomas Chen might be easier to find than they think. The silence stretched between us. Linda looked uncomfortable, but Castellanos was studying me with new interest. In the course of our investigation, he said carefully, we might uncover information about your son's whereabouts. If that information became part of public court records. My phone rang. Unknown number, but not the same one Tommy had been texting from. I answered on speaker. Margaret Chen? The voice was unfamiliar, rough around the edges. Who is this? Someone looking for your son. He owes my employer a considerable amount of money. Castellanos was frantically gesturing for me to hang up, but I stayed on the line. I don't know where he is. That's funny, because we heard he came into some money recently. House sale, wasn't it? Your house. My blood went cold. How do you know about that? We know lots of things, Mrs. Chen. Like how Tommy told everyone you were dead to make the sale clean. Imagine our surprise when we found out you're very much alive. Linda had gone pale. Castellanos was scribbling notes furiously. What do you want? I asked. Same thing you want, I imagine. To find Tommy and have a conversation about his debts. Maybe we can help each other. The line went dead. Castellanos set down his pen. Mrs. Chen, this case just became significantly more complicated. If organized crime figures are involved. They're not after me, I said. They're after Tommy. And they're probably better at finding him than the police are. You can't seriously be considering. I'm not considering anything. I'm just observing that my son has made enemies on multiple fronts. I stood up, clutching my purse. Mr. Castellanos, you said he was getting nervous. How nervous do you think he'll be when he realizes his creditors know about the fraud? My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy's number, *, someone's been asking questions about me. If you're behind this, stop now. You don't understand what you're dealing with, asterisk. I showed the message to Castellanos. For the first time since we'd arrived, he looked genuinely concerned. Mrs. Chen, maybe we should consider a more conservative approach. Conservative approaches are what got me into this mess, I said. I've spent 67 years being careful, responsible, putting other people's needs first. Look where it landed me. I was tired of being the victim in my own story. The call came at 3:17 a.m. in the shelter dormitory. I'd been lying awake anyway, listening to the symphony of snores and restless movements around me, when my phone vibrated against the thin mattress. Tommy's number. I slipped into the hallway to answer. Mom. His voice was hoarse, desperate. We need to talk. Do we? I kept my voice level, though my heart was hammering. Because according to the state of Massachusetts, I've been dead for 4 months. I can explain. Can you? Can you explain the forged death certificate? The fake will? Or how about telling that nice young family that you inherited the house from your deceased mother? Silence. Then, you don't understand the situation I was in. Enlighten me, Thomas. He'd always hated when I used his full name. Even as a child, it meant he was in serious trouble. The people I owe money to. Mom, they weren't going to wait. They made threats. Real ones. Against me, against Rebecca and the kids. My breath caught. Rebecca was his ex-wife, and despite their bitter divorce, I knew Tommy still loved his 2 young daughters. What kind of threats? The kind where people disappear, Mom. I had 48 hours to come up with $400,000 or they were going to start with Emily. His voice cracked on his daughter's name. She's only 7. What was I supposed to do? For a moment, I felt the familiar pull of maternal instinct. Tommy in crisis, needing me to fix things like I had countless times before. But then I remembered Sarah's baby sleeping in what used to be my guest room. You were supposed to call the police, I said. Or the FBI. You were supposed to ask your family for help instead of destroying us. I tried. I called you in Rome, remember? But you were so happy, talking about Dad's ashes and the lavender fields. I couldn't, he stopped abruptly. You called me March 3rd, I said slowly. Asked how the trip was going, if I was extending it like I'd mentioned. You already had the death certificate filed by then, didn't you? Another silence. The whole grieving son act was bullshit, I continued. You'd already decided to kill me off before you even made that call. It wasn't supposed to go this far. His voice was small now, like when he was 8 and had broken David's coffee mug. I thought I could fix it before you got back. Win enough to buy the house back, restore your accounts. You'd never have to know. Win enough? I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty hallway. Tommy, you stole my life savings to pay gambling debts, then planned to gamble more money to fix it? I had a system. You're 43 years old. The words exploded out of me. When are you going to stop believing in magical solutions to problems you created? A door opened down the hall. Marcus the intake worker peered out, frowning at me. I lowered my voice. Where are you, Tommy? Somewhere safe. Mom, listen to me. Those people who called you, stay away from them. Don't answer if they contact you again. Why? Because they might tell me the truth about who my son really is. Because they'll use you to get to me, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process. My phone buzzed with another call. The same number from the lawyer's office, Tommy's creditors. They're calling me right now, I said. Don't answer it. I looked at the buzzing phone, then at my reflection in the shelter's grimy hallway window. Gray-haired, exhausted, wearing yesterday's clothes because they were the only ones I owned. Give me one good reason why I should protect you, I said. Because I'm your son. No, I said quietly. My son died the day you filed that death certificate. This is someone else. Someone who wears his face. I hung up and answered the other call. Mrs. Chen? We have a proposition for you. The man's voice was different this time, calmer, more businesslike. We understand you're interested in locating your son. I pressed my back against the shelter's cold wall, acutely aware that I was negotiating with criminals at 3:20 a.m. in a homeless facility. 6 months ago, my biggest worry was whether to plant tomatoes or peppers in David's old garden bed. I'm interested in getting my life back, I said carefully. Same thing, really. Tommy owes our organization $380,000. The house sale netted him $340,000 after realtor fees and closing costs. That leaves a balance. Plus interest, I assume. You assume correctly. Mrs. Chen, we're not unreasonable people. We understand Tommy put you in a difficult position. Difficult position. As if being declared dead and homeless was a minor inconvenience. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Information exchange. We have resources your lawyers don't. We can find Tommy faster than any court order or police investigation. Once we locate him, we can ensure he faces consequences for his actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Please tell me you didn't answer that call. And what do you want from me? I asked the voice. Tommy's patterns. Places he might go, people he might contact. His ex-wife Rebecca has been surprisingly uncooperative. The mention of Rebecca sent ice through my veins. You contacted my daughter-in-law? Former daughter-in-law. She claims she hasn't heard from Tommy since their divorce was finalized. We believe she's lying. I thought of Rebecca, sweet, tired Rebecca who tried so hard to make her marriage work despite Tommy's increasingly erratic behavior. She brought the girls to visit me every Sunday after the divorce, maintaining a relationship even after Tommy had poisoned most of his other connections. Leave Rebecca and her children alone, I said. They're not part of this. Everyone's part of this until we get our money back, Mrs. Chen. Tommy made sure of that when he involved his entire family in his fraud scheme. Another text from Tommy, *Mom, whatever they're offering you, don't do it. These aren't people who honor agreements, *. But a different thought was crystallizing in my mind. How do I know you're who you say you are? I asked. How do I know you're not working with Tommy to manipulate me somehow? A pause. Then, check your email. I hung up and walked to the shelter's computer room, hoping the night attendant wouldn't notice me accessing the system after hours. My inbox had one new message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, verification. The email contained 3 photographs. The first showed Tommy's apartment building with a red circle drawn around his former unit. The second was a close-up of his car, the blue Honda Civic I'd helped him buy 2 years ago, sitting in what looked like a long-term parking garage. The third photo made my hands shake. It was taken through a restaurant window, showing Rebecca and my granddaughters Emily and Sophie having lunch. Emily was coloring on a kid's menu while Sophie fed herself applesauce with the determined concentration of a 3-year-old. My phone rang immediately. As you can see, Mrs. Chen, we're very good at finding people. The question is whether we find Tommy before or after we lose patience with his family's lack of cooperation. Those children are innocent, I whispered. So were you, according to what we've learned about Tommy's little fraud scheme. Innocence doesn't seem to matter much to your son. I stared at the photo of my granddaughters, remembering Emily's excitement last Christmas when she'd helped me bake cookies, how she'd insisted on adding extra chocolate chips because Grandma, cookies should be happy. Sophie had been learning to walk then, taking wobbly steps between furniture pieces while we all cheered. Tommy had put them in danger too. Everyone who'd ever loved him was now a potential target because of his choices. What do you want to know? I asked. That's better. First question, besides Rebecca, who else might Tommy contact if he was desperate? I closed my eyes, thinking. His old college roommate Jake Morrison lives in Portland. Tommy always said Jake would help him disappear if he ever needed to start over. Good. What else? There's a cabin in New Hampshire. Tommy's father-in-law owned it before he died. Rebecca might still have access, but she probably doesn't know Tommy kept a spare key hidden under the back deck. Address? I gave him the information, each detail feeling like another betrayal. But the photo of my granddaughters burned in my mind. Tommy had made this choice when he decided our family was expendable. Mrs. Chen, you've been very helpful. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. Wait, I said. When you find him. Yes? Make sure he knows this came from me. The phone call from Rebecca came at 6:43 a.m., just as the shelter was starting its morning routine. Her voice was tight with panic. Margaret, please tell me you haven't been talking to anyone about Tommy. I stepped into the hallway again, watching other residents shuffle toward the communal breakfast area. What do you mean? Someone broke into my house last night. Nothing was taken, but they went through everything. Photo albums, old letters, Emily's school papers, anything that might have Tommy's information. My stomach dropped. Are you and the girls okay? We're staying at my sister's now. But Margaret, Emily found a note on her bedroom pillow this morning. It said, tell Daddy to call home. Rebecca's voice broke. They were in my daughter's room while we were sleeping. I closed my eyes, remembering the cold voice on the phone, the photo of my granddaughters at lunch. I thought I was protecting them by cooperating. Instead, I'd given predators a roadmap to my family. Rebecca, take the girls and go somewhere far away. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I can't just disappear. I have work, the girls have school. School won't matter if something happens to them. The words came out harsher than I intended. An elderly man walking past gave me a concerned look. Margaret, what aren't you telling me? How bad is this situation really? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Tommy's number. Asterisk, you told them about the cabin. They found the key exactly where you said it would be. But I wasn't there, Mom. I'm smarter than you think, asterisk. Then another message immediately after, but Rebecca and the girls won't be so lucky if you keep helping them. I felt the blood drain from my face. Rebecca, listen to me very carefully. Pack 1 bag for each of you. Take cash if you have it, no credit cards they can trace. Drive to your sister's, get the girls, and go to your mother's house in Albany. My mother's been dead for 3 years. I know. But Tommy doesn't know that. He never paid attention to details about your family. I was thinking frantically, trying to remember what information I'd given away. From Albany, go somewhere Tommy's never been. Somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Margaret, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Tommy owes money to people who threaten children to collect debts. Silence on her end. Then, how much money? $400,000. Jesus Christ. A pause. Margaret, there's something else. Tommy called me 2 days ago. My heart stopped. What did he say? He wanted to know if I still had the key to Dad's cabin. Said he was thinking about happy memories, wanted to drive up there for closure. Her voice turned bitter. I actually felt sorry for him. Told him I'd given the key back to the property management company after Dad's estate was settled. But that wasn't true. No. I kept it. The girls love that place, and I couldn't bear to cut all ties. She paused. If those people went to the cabin looking for him, they found a key that shouldn't exist, which means you lied to them. I pressed my forehead against the cool wall. Rebecca, they're going to come back. My phone rang. The familiar number of Tommy's creditors. Don't talk to them again, Rebecca whispered, but I was already answering. Mrs. Chen. It seems you left out some important details about the cabin. I told you what I knew. You told us there was a spare key hidden under the back deck. But the property management company has no record of your son having access to that cabin for over 2 years. Which means someone else has been maintaining that hiding place. I said nothing. We had an interesting conversation with Rebecca's neighbors this morning. Lovely family. They mentioned seeing her take the girls up to New Hampshire several times this summer. Same cabin where we found that key you told us about. My hands were shaking. What do you want? We want to know why Tommy's ex-wife lied about having access to a property where he might be hiding. And we want to know what else you and she have been keeping from us. The line went dead. Rebecca was still on the other phone. Margaret? Margaret, what's happening? But I was staring at a new text from Tommy. Asterisk, they're coming for Rebecca next. This is what happens when you choose them over family, asterisk. I hung up on Rebecca and immediately called Castellanos, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. It was 7:15 a.m., but this couldn't wait. Mrs. Chen? What's? They're going after my daughter-in-law and granddaughters, I said, pacing the shelter's narrow hallway. I gave them information about Tommy, and now they're threatening Rebecca. Slow down. What information? A cabin in New Hampshire. Tommy's hiding places. I thought, my voice cracked. I thought if I helped them find Tommy faster, they'd leave the rest of us alone. Castellanos was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Chen, I need you to listen very carefully. Do not have any more contact with these people. No calls, no texts, nothing. It's too late for that. They know Rebecca lied about having access to the cabin. They talked to her neighbors. Where's Rebecca now? Driving to Albany with the girls. At least, I hope she is. I thought about Emily's 7-year-old logic, how she always wanted to stop for ice cream on long car trips. What if they follow her? What if? We're calling the FBI, Castellanos interrupted. This has moved beyond civil fraud into organized crime and interstate threats. I have contacts in the Boston field office. My phone buzzed with another text from Tommy, *, meet me at Riverside Elementary. 1 hour. Come alone or Rebecca pays for your choices, *. I showed the message to Marcus, who'd been hovering nearby with obvious concern. He read it and immediately shook his head. Ma'am, you cannot go meet this person. Not after what you just told me about threats. But I was already thinking. Riverside Elementary, the school where I'd taught for 37 years. Where I'd gotten my first job at 25, where I'd spent countless evenings grading papers and preparing lessons. Where Tommy himself had been a student, back when he still brought me dandelions and cried over accidentally stepping on beetles. He chose that location for a reason, I told Castellanos when I called him back. It's public, but also personal. He's trying to manipulate me. Don't even consider it, Mrs. Chen. If Tommy wanted to make this right, he wouldn't be threatening his own children. But what if he has information about where these people are going to look for Rebecca? What if he knows something that could help protect the girls? Or what if it's a trap designed to get you in the same place as his creditors? Mrs. Chen, think about this logically. Your son has lied to you about everything for months. Why would you trust him now? Because he's still my child, I thought but didn't say. Even after everything he'd done, some primitive maternal instinct still wanted to believe he could be saved. Instead, I said, what if I go but bring backup? Police, FBI agents? What if you don't go at all and let law enforcement handle this? My phone rang. Rebecca's number. Margaret, they found us. Her voice was barely a whisper. We stopped for gas outside Springfield, and there was a man watching us from across the street. He followed us for 15 miles before I lost him on back roads. Where are you now? Pulled over behind a McDonald's. The girls think this is some kind of adventure, but Emily keeps asking why Mommy looks scared. I looked around the shelter's lobby, at the worn furniture, the motivational posters about rebuilding your life, the other residents clutching their few belongings. 48 hours ago, I'd been a retired teacher coming home from spreading her husband's ashes in Scotland. Now I was homeless, legally dead, and my family was being hunted by criminals because of choices my son had made. Rebecca, I'm going to meet Tommy in an hour. He says he'll leave you alone if I come. Margaret, no. You can't trust him. I can't trust anyone anymore, I said. But I can try to buy you enough time to disappear properly. Because despite everything Tommy had done to me, I wasn't going to let him destroy his daughters too. Even if saving them meant walking into a trap. The elementary school playground looked smaller than I remembered. I sat on the same bench where I used to eat lunch during my teaching years, watching the empty swings move in the October breeze. At 8:43 a.m., the school was in session, children's voices drifting from classroom windows like echoes of my former life. Tommy emerged from behind the building exactly 1 hour after his text, moving with the careful awareness of someone who'd been looking over his shoulder for months. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made him look older than his 43 years. You actually came, he said, sitting on the far end of the bench like he was afraid I might bolt. Rebecca and the girls are innocent in this, I said without preamble. Whatever arrangement you need to make with these people, leave them out of it. It's not that simple, Mom. He rubbed his face with both hands. They don't believe I acted alone anymore. The financial records show you gave me power of attorney, access to your accounts. They think you were complicit. My blood went cold. What do you mean, complicit? They think we planned this together. Mother and son team, fake your death, split the money, disappear together. He looked at me with something that might have been regret. I may have let them believe that was possible when they first started asking questions. You told them I was part of this? The words came out as a whisper. I told them you might be willing to negotiate if they left Rebecca alone. That maybe we could work something out. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. Thomas, I am homeless. I am literally living in a shelter because of what you did. How exactly did you think I could help negotiate anything? The life insurance policy on Dad. The one that matured last year, $180,000. Plus your pension fund if you cash it out early. Together, that's almost enough to clear my debt. My hands clenched into fists. That insurance money was supposed to last me through retirement. The pension is what I paid into for 40 years of teaching. I know, but... And you want me to hand it over to the criminals you borrowed money from to gamble? I stood up, pacing in front of the bench. After you already stole my house, my savings, my entire identity. Mom, please. If we don't give them something substantial, they're going to hurt Rebecca and the girls to get to me. A black sedan pulled into the school parking lot. 2 men in suits got out, moving with a purposeful stride of federal agents. Tommy saw them too and immediately tensed. Did you call the FBI? He asked. My lawyer did. I watched the agents approaching. Tommy, if you run now, they'll assume you're guilty of everything. I am guilty of everything. He stood, glancing toward the tree line behind the school. But Mom, listen to me carefully. Those people I owe money to, they have someone inside the Boston FBI field office. Someone who's been feeding them information about federal investigations. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? How do you think they knew so much about the house sale? About your travel schedule? I never told them those details. He was backing away from the bench, toward the playground equipment. Agent Sarah Morrison, she's Jake Morrison's sister. My college roommate Jake. The name hit me like ice water. I'd mentioned Jake to Tommy's creditors during our phone conversation. Jake Morrison, who lived in Portland, who Tommy said would help him disappear. The agents were 50 yards away and closing fast. One of them spoke into a radio. Tommy, if there's a corrupt agent, we need to report it through proper channels. There are no proper channels. He was almost shouting now. Mom, they've been tracking you since you got back from Europe. Every phone call, every meeting with lawyers, every night you've spent in that shelter. Agent Morrison has been feeding them everything. One of the approaching agents raised his hand in a greeting. Mrs. Chen? We'd like to speak with you. But Tommy was already running toward the woods, leaving me standing alone on the playground of my former school, realizing that the FBI agents walking toward me might not be there to help at all. My phone buzzed with one final text from Tommy's number, * the storage unit on Elm Street, number 247. Everything you need to know is there. Code is Emily's birthday *. Then I watched my son disappear into the trees while 2 federal agents who might be working for criminals approached with smiles that no longer looked reassuring. The FBI agents reached me just as Tommy disappeared into the tree line. The shorter one, a woman with prematurely gray hair, extended her badge with a practiced smile. Mrs. Chen? I'm Agent Sarah Morrison, Boston Field Office. This is Agent Rodriguez. We understand you've been in contact with some dangerous individuals. My blood turned to ice. Morrison. Jake Morrison's sister, according to Tommy. The corrupt agent he'd warned me about 30 seconds before vanishing into the woods behind Riverside Elementary. Have I? I kept my voice steady, clutching my purse tighter. I'd been in contact with a lot of people since discovering I was legally dead. Agent Rodriguez consulted his notepad. We're specifically interested in the phone calls you've received from associates of Vincent Torino. He runs a high-interest lending operation that your son became involved with. Vincent Torino. Finally, a name for the voice that had been threatening my family. What about them? Mrs. Chen, these people are extremely dangerous, Agent Morrison said, her tone concerned and professional. We believe they've been using you to locate your son. Any cooperation you provided them, even under duress, could be putting your entire family at risk. Everything she said was reasonable, exactly what legitimate federal agents should say in this situation. But Tommy's words echoed in my mind, someone inside the Boston FBI field office. What would you like me to do? I asked carefully. We need you to come to our office for a formal debriefing, Morrison replied. Tell us everything about your communications with Torino's people. Help us build a case that will protect your family and put these criminals away. Rodriguez was scanning the woods where Tommy had disappeared. Mrs. Chen, was that your son we saw leaving the area? I wouldn't know, I said. According to the state of Massachusetts, my son buried me 4 months ago. Morrison's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. We understand this has been traumatic. But Thomas Chen is facing serious federal charges for identity theft, wire fraud, and elder abuse. If he contacts you again, you need to call us immediately. She handed me a business card. FBI seal, Boston field office address, phone number that looked official. But when I studied her photo ID more closely, something felt wrong. The font looked slightly off, the holographic seal not quite right. Agent Morrison, I said, what's your brother's name? She blinked. Excuse me? Simple question. What's your brother's name? Rodriguez stepped closer. Mrs. Chen, is there a reason you're asking personal questions? Because if she was really Jake Morrison's sister, she'd answer without hesitation. If she was impersonating an FBI agent to get information for Vincent Torino, she might not know Jake existed. James, Morrison said after a pause. My brother's name is James. Wrong answer. Tommy's college roommate had always been Jake Morrison, never James. I'd met him at graduation, at Tommy's wedding. Jake with the terrible jokes and the motorcycle he was always fixing. That's nice, I said pleasantly. I don't think I know any James Morrisons. But I was already backing toward the school building, toward the main entrance where there would be witnesses. Real teachers, administrators, people who'd known me for decades. Mrs. Chen, you need to come with us now, Rodriguez said, his friendly demeanor evaporating. This isn't a request anymore. Actually, I think I'll go inside and call the real FBI. I was almost to the entrance. I'm sure they'll be very interested in people impersonating federal agents. Morrison's hand moved toward her jacket. Mrs. Chen. The school's front door opened and Principal Hayes emerged, the same woman who'd hired me fresh out of college 42 years ago. She looked older, grayer, but her sharp eyes took in the situation immediately. Margaret Chen, she exclaimed loudly. What a wonderful surprise. Please, come inside. I was just telling the staff about your donation to our library fund. The donation mentioned in my fake obituary. Hayes had read it, realized I was very much alive, and was now giving me an escape route. That sounds lovely, I said, hurrying toward her. I'd love to see how the school has changed. Behind me, I heard Morrison curse under her breath. But they couldn't forcibly abduct me from a school full of witnesses in broad daylight. As Hayes ushered me inside, I caught a glimpse of the fake agents retreating toward their sedan, already talking on phones. Reporting back to Vincent Torino that I'd slipped away. Margaret, Hayes whispered as we walked down the familiar hallway lined with student artwork, what in God's name is going on? I thought about Tommy's final text. A storage unit on Elm Street, number 247. Code Emily's birthday, July 15th, so 0715. I'm not sure yet, I told her. But I think I'm about to find out. Because whatever my son had hidden in that storage unit, it was important enough for criminals to impersonate federal agents to stop me from finding it. Principal Hayes led me through the school's back corridors to her office, the same route I'd taken countless times during parent conferences and staff meetings. The familiar smell of floor wax and cafeteria food should have been comforting, but my hands were still shaking from the encounter with the fake FBI agents. Margaret, I need to ask you something, Hayes said, closing her office door. When I read your obituary in March, I was devastated. But when I called the district to arrange sending flowers to your service, they said there hadn't been one. That seemed odd. I slumped into the chair across from her desk, the same one where I'd sat for performance reviews and retirement planning meetings. Because I wasn't actually dead. My son forged the death certificate to steal my house. Hayes stared at me for a long moment. My God, Margaret. And those men outside? They work for the people Tommy owes money to. $400,000 in gambling debts. I pulled out my phone to check for messages. 3 missed calls from Castellanos, 2 from Linda. They've been threatening my granddaughters. We're calling the real police right now, Hayes said, reaching for her phone. Wait. I thought about Tommy's warning about corruption, about fake agents who knew too much about my movements. What if we can't trust them either? What if some of the local police are compromised too? Hayes paused, her hand hovering over the receiver. Margaret, you can't suspect everyone. But my phone was buzzing with a text from an unknown number. Elm Street storage facility is being watched. Torino's people arrived 10 minutes ago. Whatever your son hid there, they want it too. A friend. A friend. Someone was helping me, but who? And how did they know about the storage unit when I'd only learned about it 20 minutes ago? Another text from the same number. Loading dock behind Riverside Elementary. White van. 5 minutes. I showed the messages to Hayes. Someone wants to help me get to that storage unit. Margaret, this could be another trap. Everything's a trap at this point. I stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the teacher parking lot. The fake FBI agent's sedan was gone, but I could see a white van parked near the loading dock. But Tommy said everything I need to know is in that storage unit. Maybe it's proof of the corruption, evidence I can use to protect Rebecca and the girls. Hayes was quiet for a moment. What if I go with you? 2 people are harder to kidnap than 1. Absolutely not. You have a school to run, teachers and children depending on you. I thought about Sarah and Mark's baby, sleeping peacefully in my former home while his parents worried about the crazy old woman who'd appeared on their porch. I've lost enough people to Tommy's mistakes. My phone rang. Castellanos. Mrs. Chen, where the hell are you? I've been calling for an hour. Hiding from fake FBI agents at my old school, I said. Long story. What did you find out? Vincent Torino is bad news. Loan sharking, money laundering, suspected of at least 3 murders though nothing was ever proven. But here's the interesting part, the FBI has been investigating his operation for 2 years. There's definitely someone on his payroll feeding him information. Someone named Morrison? How did you, never mind. Yes, potentially. Mrs. Chen, you need to get somewhere safe and stay there until we can sort this out through proper channels. I watched the white van through the window. Someone inside was holding up a sign, Rebecca is safe. Mr. Castellanos, what if proper channels are exactly what got us into this mess? I said. What if playing by the rules is why Tommy thought he could erase me without consequences? Mrs. Chen. I'll call you in 2 hours, I said, and hung up. Hayes was studying my face. You're going to get in that van, aren't you? I'm going to find out what my son was desperate enough to hide that criminals are impersonating federal agents to stop me. I headed toward the door. And then I'm going to use it to end this nightmare once and for all. Because at 67 years old, sitting in a homeless shelter while my family was threatened by predators, I'd finally learned that sometimes the only way to stop being a victim was to become dangerous yourself. The white van's driver was Rebecca. I stared through the passenger window at my daughter-in-law, who was supposed to be fleeing to safety with my granddaughters. Instead, she was parked behind my former elementary school, holding up a handwritten sign about her own safety. Get in, she said as I approached. We have maybe 10 minutes before Torino's people figure out where you went. Rebecca, what are you doing here? Where are Emily and Sophie? Safe with my sister in Connecticut. Real FBI agents picked them up 2 hours ago, actual federal agents, not the fake ones who've been tracking you. She pulled away from the school as I buckled my seatbelt. Margaret, Tommy called me this morning. Told me about the storage unit and what's inside it. What's inside it? Evidence that's going to destroy Vincent Torino's entire operation. And proof that Agent Sarah Morrison has been feeding information to criminals for 3 years. We drove through Springfield's morning traffic, past the bank where I'd had my accounts for 30 years, past the coffee shop where David and I used to have Sunday breakfast. Normal life continuing while my world had turned into a crime thriller. Tommy's been recording conversations for months, Rebecca continued. Every meeting with Torino's people, every phone call with Morrison. He knew they'd eventually come after his family, so he documented everything. Why didn't he just go to the authorities? Because Morrison was his contact point with the FBI. She convinced him she was investigating Torino, that cooperating with her would protect us. Instead, she was setting him up to take the fall for money laundering. The storage facility on Elm Street was a long row of metal units behind a chain-link fence. Rebecca parked across the street, pointing to Unit 247. 2 of Torino's men have been watching it since 8 this morning. But there's a back entrance through the auto shop next door. How do you know all this? Because I've been planning this for 6 weeks, ever since Tommy first disappeared. Rebecca's voice was steady, determined. Margaret, my ex-husband destroyed your life, but he's still my daughter's father. I wasn't going to let him disappear forever or end up dead in some warehouse. We circled around to the auto shop, where the owner, apparently Rebecca's cousin, led us through his back lot to the storage facility's rear fence. Rebecca had bolt cutters. This wasn't a desperate improvisation, this was a carefully orchestrated plan. Tommy gave you the access code? I asked as we approached Unit 247. 0715. Emily's birthday. Rebecca punched in the numbers, and the electronic lock clicked open. Inside the storage unit were 3 boxes of documents, 2 laptops, and a dozen recording devices. Rebecca immediately went to the first laptop, plugging in a flash drive. Morrison's bank records, she said, typing rapidly. Deposits from Torino's shell companies totaling $340,000 over 3 years. Phone records showing calls to known criminals before FBI raids that mysteriously came up empty. I opened the first document box. Loan agreements between Tommy and Torino's organization, but with interest rates that were clearly illegal. Photos of meetings between Morrison and Torino's lieutenants. Most damning of all, recordings of Morrison coaching Tommy on exactly how to forge my death certificate. She knew, I whispered, listening to Agent Morrison's voice explaining which documents would be needed to establish my death. The FBI agent knew Tommy was committing identity theft, and she helped him do it. Because a dead Margaret Chin couldn't testify about her son's gambling debts or the illegal loans, Rebecca said grimly. You were supposed to disappear permanently. My phone rang. The real Robert Castellanos. Mrs. Chen, thank God. I just got off the phone with the actual FBI Boston field office. There is no agent Sarah Morrison working there. The woman you met is Cristina Valdez, one of Torino's associates. We know, I said. And we have everything we need to prove it. What do you mean, we? I looked at Rebecca, systematically copying files to multiple flash drives with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this operation down to the minute. I mean, my daughter-in-law and I are about to hand you enough evidence to put Vincent Torino and his fake federal agent in prison for the next 20 years, I said. Along with documentation proving that my son's identity theft was orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to be investigating him. Mrs. Chen, you need to get out of there immediately and bring that evidence too. We're already gone, Rebecca said, grabbing the laptops. Tommy's meeting us at the district attorney's office in 1 hour. Turns out he never actually fled the state. He's been hiding in the basement of Sacred Heart Church, helping Father Martinez with a food pantry. My son, the criminal mastermind who destroyed my life, had been labeling soup for homeless people 6 blocks from where I was sleeping in a shelter. Why? I asked as we loaded the evidence into Rebecca's van. Why reveal himself now? Rebecca paused, a box of documents in her arms. Because when you chose to help me and the girls instead of just recovering your money, Tommy realized he'd been wrong about what kind of person you are. He thought you'd become hard and bitter after David died. Instead, you're still the mother who taught him that family protects each other, even when they don't deserve it. 3 hours later, I stood in District Attorney Patricia Williams' conference room, watching federal agents arrest Cristina Valdez as she arrived for what she thought was a meeting with Vincent Torino. Tommy sat beside me, looking smaller and older than I remembered, but alive and ready to testify against everyone who threatened his family. The house on Maple Street would take months of legal wrangling to recover, but Sarah and Mark had already agreed to sell it back to me at their original purchase price once the courts sorted out the fraud. My bank accounts were being restored, my death certificate voided, my identity returned from the legal grave. Tommy would serve 18 months in federal prison for the initial fraud, but his cooperation against Torino's organization had earned him a plea deal that would keep him alive and eventually reunited with his daughters. Vincent Torino would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. And I would never again give anyone power of attorney over my existence. At 67 years old, I'd learned that sometimes the only way to come back from the dead is to refuse to stay buried.